think we can start with the second panel, right? We have also our colleague joining us online. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sticking with us also for this second panel. After the coffee break, I can imagine that it's not easy to come back and listen for another 60 or 75 minutes, but I do, and we all do, appreciate your interest in the conference. My name is Giga Factor. As it was already said, I represent here European Institute for European Policy, coordinator of this project, and it is my pleasure to moderate the second panel of today's conference titled Visegrad Countries and Serbia Sharing the Path to Carbon Neutrality. First and foremost, I would like to introduce you to our panelists. On my left is our colleague and one of the people that joined also the the study trips, not the student trips, but the study trips. Milena Antic, she's the Secretary General of Koalicija 27 and representing basically this umbrella organization of expert think tanks dealing with the Chapter 27 of the EU accession process. On my further left, we have Aleksandar Kovacevic, who is an energy expert representing our partners, European Movement in Serbia, here on this panel. And online, unfortunately, we are joined by my colleague at Europeum, Rebecca Hengelova, our research fellow from a Green Europe team based in Prague normally. She was planning to join us, but unfortunately, due to some circumstances, she was not able to come to Belgrade. So thank you, Rebecca, for joining us online. And one other panelist that we were supposed to be joined was our colleague from Slovakia, Alžbeta Gavalcova, but unfortunately she was sick and she couldn't come to Belgrade in person. So, but without further ado, we will manage this discussion also only 3 of us instead of 4. Before jumping in the discussion, I would just like to tell you a bit more about the project itself, what it actually encompassed, and what we try to achieve with all the activities. Because it is not only about today's conference here in Belgrade, we actually kicked off the cooperation under this consortium already at the end of last year, also with events here in Belgrade that were focusing on sharing actually the know-how among the civil society groups. And then what I already mentioned was the study visits to the V4 capitals. Milena was part of those study visits. We already had also on the first panel Sandra Lazic and Damir Dezdarevic joining us. And Filip, can I ask you, we are running out of batteries, so we have to keep Rebecca online. The charger is up there. So, to continue, we had study visits of the experts both from the civil society but also from the ministries visiting all the V4 capitals. And on this we actually based not only the policy papers that I hope you all saw or maybe took with you, they're also available online. One of them is focusing on the decarbonization and just transition in the V4 countries. The other one is focusing on the Serbia's transition, also in regards to the experience learned from the V4 countries. You can also find these available electronically either on the webpage of Europeum or also here from our partners, European Movement. So if anyone is interested in having an electronic version, I'm pretty sure we can send out those as well. So let's jump now to the discussion itself. I would first give the floor to Aleksandar, who is actually the main author of the Serbia study. Aleksandar, also looking into the discussion that we had today, the things that were already mentioned when it comes to the relation and similar path of the V4 countries with Serbia. What are the main outcomes of the study? What would you highlight as things that not only are important for Serbia's energy transition, but also what can be learned from the V4 coming out and stemming from the study itself?
Well, I would like to make a little of course, you are going to read the study, but let's talk a little bit wider, before and after. Talking about decarbonization, to big difference to Central Europe, which had a process during 1980s to increasing use of or import of natural gas. And natural gas took a pretty big part of the energy balance. From May 1992 till October 1992, Serbia have done the largest decarbonization process so far. Probably the fastest one in Europe ever. During these 3 months, 16% of the energy balance, which was the light heating oil and imported coal, disappeared and was replaced by fuel wood. As a consequence, Serbia went into a process of massive deforestation, which lasts till today. So wood industry is gone, furniture industry is gone, cross-laminated wood is gone, construction wood is gone, which means that countries who have built by that time the largest cross-laminated wood construction in Europe was not able to build anything like that anymore. So nearly 200,000 workers lost their jobs. Nobody gave them 16 years warning that something like that may happen. Nobody provided anything like just transition to them. They've been just laid out, simply. Companies are gone. They simply don't exist anymore. Big companies, large exporters to entire world, to Europe, to United States, etc. So the energy structure of Serbia was radically changed within 3 months. Now we are saying that we are not able to do any kind of transition for a number of years. Something is wrong in this policy. So that's one dimension of this. If you look at the energy structure otherwise, the remaining 84%, it's fairly similar as it was at that time. More or less that much oil, that much lignite, that much hydropower, etc., etc. So not too different. As a consequence of this big change, Serbia is more material intensive economy than European Union in average. But this material intensity, to make it different from Europe, where most of the material intensity are actually industrial raw materials, etc., which are actually making considerable economic value. In Serbia, fuel wood and lignite practically dominate. So fuel wood and lignite, with very, very poor efficiency of use, essentially is equal to average material intensity in Europe per capita. This is a kind of economic structure which cannot, in any circumstances, cannot get into European Union and cannot compete. Whatever legal structures, harmonization, economic restructuring, government restructuring, whatever is done over there, this occasion has actually preclude any kind of accession. To make things worse for our colleagues in Central Europe, we have converted all hydropower potential, the largest in Europe, to domestic use. So practically, Central Europe is left without the largest flexible power generation capacity available. And it was entirely dependent on natural gas flexibility, essentially the underground gas storages in Ukraine, and to some extent flexibility of Western European gas system. Of course, Central Europe went into system to import relatively low-priced natural gas from Russia, followed by relatively competitively priced coal and relatively competitively priced crude oil. We have uncompetitive refineries in Central Europe that are still working despite of the big changes on the world market, completely artificially. So we had a process for the last 30 years, a kind of economic laboratory, where a big part of Europe was practically separated from the world market. By occasion, the Danube River and Belgrade port are not in use. So Serbia have done a big, very big strategic impact to entire Central Europe. And a big change in itself. So now we are, of course, trying somehow to avoid and not to face this problem. So that's where we are. We are talking everything else. We are talking harmonization. We are talking EU accession. We are talking, big words. But we are not talking the fundamental thing. The River Danube and the Belgrade port are working at 15% of available capacity. That practically deprives Central Europe from Mediterranean market and the world markets altogether. So this is where we stand. Okay. Since we are there, of course, we have to get rid of this material intensity. And these are two major things. Remove energy poverty. Help people to use fuel wood better. Reduce fantastic pollution, indoor pollution, gender impact to females over there, and all kinds of other aspects, and actually restore forests. This is number one priority. That was number one priority. I was talking in 2005 to parliamentary group of the Southeastern Europe in Skopje, just before signing Energy Community Treaty. That was the number one priority of the Energy Community Treaty. And that number one priority is mentioned in the only one report of European Commission to European Parliament about Energy Community Treaty from the beginning of 2011. One report for 17 years. Try to find another European institution with just one report in 17 years. The second priority was implementation of the Large Combustion Plant Directive to existing lignite fire power plants. That was a material obligation of the Energy Community Treaty, and the deadline was, listen this, 31st December 2023. In 108 days from now. Of course, Central European countries have made some adjustments toward large combustion plant directive, and Serbian emissions of sulfur dioxide are now equal to 42% of all European emissions of sulfur dioxide. 42%. A small country, less than 1% of the European continent by number of people. I don't know if our neighbors in Central Europe enjoy these emissions of CO2, SO2, but nothing has been done really. No funding was available to do this job. In the meantime, we have signed the Paris Agreement, ratified it. We have signed the Global Methane Pledge. We have Serbia voted in favor of the UN General Assembly resolution about human rights and environment. And Serbia made a strong commitment in this direction to do eventually something. But there was a free allocation from EU ETS system available to Central Europe, not in Serbia. There was direct state aid for the purpose of large combustion plant directive in Central Europe, not in Serbia. There is a modernization fund with 16 billion euros available right now for this purpose in Central Europe and not in Serbia. And we are competing on the same market. A few days ago, modernization fund is extended to Slovenia and Greece. Effectively, all competing electrical utilities around are now covered, supported by modernization fund. An electrical utility in this country is not. So this is a situation in physical reality. I very much understand that there is another reality. There is political reality, there is fiscal reality, there is administrative reality. But there is also this physical reality, which is usually forgotten. So we have a problem with this reality. Politico published a couple of hours ago kind of making sense of the State of the Union address from yesterday. And they said, I'm quoting here, climate ambition ends where economic disruption begins. We are here for win-win, not for difficult trade-offs. That came from the State of Union address. But we are indeed in very, very difficult trade-offs. We have here 6 million people, what Avignon said in the previous panel, that are affected first by combustion of fuel wood and lignite in individual stoves, and then in addition with these big sulfur dioxide emissions. So this is when we really stand. And effectively, we are now in a situation, since there is a CBAM regulation also proposed, we are now in a situation to see if the accession process is going to get another initiative on this physical reality. What is going to happen with the obligations under Energy Community Treaty and Large Combustion Plant Directive, and what is going to happen with energy poverty? These are two questions. These questions are going to provide a signal, first, about the rule of law. Is European Union really standing behind the international agreement it actually signed? And secondly, about human rights. Is there European Union which stands behind the human rights? These two questions are going to shape a accession process in next 308 days. Next 308 days, not more. This is make it or leave it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for pointing out also some of the things that we don't really consider when we discuss the current situation of Serbia's energy mix, and giving us a bit of a background also on the historical level on that, and for basically bridging the discussion a bit towards the EU side, because as I mentioned in the early beginning today, you know, those borders between the EU member states and the West Balkan states don't really mean that whatever happens in the Western Balkans shouldn't be a thing to consider for the EU. And I have to admit that dealing with the EU accession process, I mean EU enlargement policy in general, I have to say that in Brussels for past years, when the green agenda was being discussed, not everyone really thought of what is happening behind our borders. And I think this mentality is changing now. I think everyone understands pretty well that when we want to achieve green transition, we have to really think about the whole continent. And that also means, obviously, at some point including candidate countries in the instruments that are available for the member states. But to say bridging towards the EU, I would like to include now Rebecca, who is with us online, to maybe provide us with a little bit of a perspective, looking through the Czech lenses on all the challenges that are basically, you know, looking ahead to Serbia, but all challenges that Czech Republic obviously is going through already for the past decade at least. What would you point as the main obstacles, the biggest achievements of the Czech Republic when it comes to decarbonization, especially, you know, talking about, you know, kind of limiting the coal in the energy mix, and what are maybe the lessons learned on a negative side in that matter?
Thank you very much. I hope we can hear each other well. And thank you for allowing me to speak remotely in this matter. I think the biggest two lessons that arise from this study that my colleagues wrote is that the just process of decarbonization and the transition towards, let's say, a better future depends very much on a momentum of citizens' movements versus political instability. And I think this is especially pertinent for the Czech case among the four countries, where Czech Republic is so industry heavy, and over 70% of the energy mix comes from fossil fuels. We also are quite lucky with nuclear energy, but we are big coal producers and consumers. Somewhat ironically enough, the coal phase-out date of 2033 was moved earlier from the original date of 2038. However, it still does not comply with the Paris Agreement goals of limiting global warming. And I think what we could focus on more is the fact that a decently done just transition has to be bottom up, and it has to include citizens, not only NGOs, not only already formed bodies, but also individuals. A nice example is the tiny city of Horní Jiřetín in the northwestern part of Bohemia, which lies on big reserves of brown coal. However, the citizens of that town decided that they will no longer be participating in coal mining and production. And with the help of some NGOs, they actually managed to stop the process of expansion of coal infrastructure. However, this is only a tiny, tiny example. And just a week ago, or a few days ago, I was reading about an example of another small town this time in the western of Czech Republic, which actually decided in a referendum of, just for your for the scale purposes, referendum of about 400 people, they decided against renewable energy in the shape of wind farms. So what I'm trying to say is that in order for this transition to not be dependent on 4-year-long political cycles and the willingness of politicians to put their hand on the chopping block and say, yes, we will now focus more long-term, we will forego immediate quick fixes, we will perhaps be a little bit unsure in our energy supply for the short term, but we will actually invest in some renewables, and we will invest in something that will push us through the green policies towards some healthier future. In order for politicians to do this, they need the support of the civil society, and they also need to communicate about the needs of the transition in a better way. This means that it's understandable to everyone, that it's free of misinformation and such. And I also think it's important to say that, yes, the just transition, especially in the Czech Republic, is very much associated with job loss and job creation, because there are up to, I think, 25,000 people that could be affected by all of the coal mines closing. However, a well-done just transition is also about rebranding the region, so to speak, where you attract private investment so that the region can thrive even after EU funding has run out or has been used up. And it is about management of brain drain and the leaving of young communities and young generations so that they actually stay. It is about the regeneration of environment in the natural sense, so that the region is also pleasant to live in from a, let's say, psychological as well as, of course, physical health perspective. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it here. I hope I answered a little bit the question.
Yeah, maybe if I can just follow up on that. You know, we talked a lot about what has to be done, but could you elaborate a bit more on maybe evaluating what the Czech Republic has done so far? You don't have to go, you know, deep, but maybe just giving a little picture to also our colleagues here in Belgrade, because one thing that we really want to avoid is that we would be talking about the V4 experience as something that, you know, is great and that Serbia definitely has to take as a guideline for their decarbonization process. I believe there was a lot of things that didn't work out properly, and that, you know, maybe Serbia can take as an experience, you know, and to learn from this. So is there something that you would be critical about when it comes to the Czech experience with the coal phase out?
Okay, critique. I was gonna start with the positives, but I think the critique is what I was trying to highlight already, and that is the communication. I think what was done well was that the just transition process was approached through the lens of, we want to maintain employment for all those affected, and I think what has also been done quite well recently is targeted subsidies for households so that they can avoid energy poverty when it is in their power to do any kind of changes, and also quite a huge and intensive deployment of solar energies, both on an individual household level as well as on a structural level. But I think the critique is that there's a disinformation illness going on in the Czech Republic, and I in my field of work and personally I see it every day, where it then results in protests, it results in political capital being lost because governments, the current government is not so afraid, but the previous one was quite afraid to follow through on any of the EU green policies. And in some ways it reminds me a little bit of the chapter from Hungary in this study, where anything that is, let's say, climate neutral or climate friendly is considered as an imported idea from the West, and therefore not something we want to follow through on.
All right, thank you so much. We might get back to this as well. Last but not least, to Milena. You, as we mentioned already, represent this umbrella platform of civil society actors. We talked quite a lot already on the first panel about the role and the importance of actually active citizens, active engagement on the local, regional level, and we've been assured also by some by the representatives of the ministries here that they do consider civil society as a partner. You know, looking into this project that we had together and all the trips to the V4 capitals, firstly, I wanted to ask you, you know, meeting with civil society representatives in those countries, was there something that maybe surprised you, that maybe, you know, is taken differently in the V4 region? And maybe if you could also, because we are recording this panel, and hopefully this panel will also be listened to by people outside of the region of the Western Balkans, if you could maybe say a few words about what actually Koalicija 27 is, how does it function, and how do you so far perceive this cooperation with public administration?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm secretary of Coalition 27, and Coalition 27 is an informal group of 8 civil society organizations. We are founded almost 10 years ago, in 2014. 8 organizations gathered and formed Coalition 27, and since then some other organizations were also in Coalition 27, but now, from last year, we are 8 now. And the main thing which we do is publishing shadow report. So the whole idea is to follow the process of harmonization and the implementation of the policies and regulations of Republic of Serbia with the EU acquis. So through the years, we are covering Chapter 27. Now it's part of Cluster 4 and Green Agenda also. But for 10 years, we published, for 9 years, we published, now we are preparing 10th report. And so that shadow report is like report connected to EU report about progression or non-progression, in fact, because I'm working as a secretary for 5 years and not so many things were done. I can't say nothing, but it's not so good situation in that area, I can say. We cover in some reports more chapters. In the last shadow report, we will cover 8 chapters of Chapter 27, and also we give inputs to EU report. We give recommendations which should be done, but not a lot of recommendation is implemented during these 5 years. Also, we are part of working groups and public consultation process. So we encourage public participation in Serbian accession negotiations with the EU. So I don't know about Coalition 27, but as a representative of Coalition 27, I was at the study trip. I was on both trips, and I don't know if I saw in these V4 countries something similar to Coalition 27, but it was very interesting. The whole program in these study trips was very intensive and interesting, and we heard a lot of interesting things. considering civil society organizations, we saw that it's not so good situation. I think this topic with the decarbonization is not it's not the subject which is popular, and sometimes civil society organizations are not mentioning some popular subject themes. So there is, if I can say, administrative and political pressure on civil society organization, and also there is a lack of capacities and necessary documentation for using EU fund in, they say that. So some good examples for us, already Damir mentioned, Shipyard Foundation and that project between Citizens Wild Assembly, and online informational platform connecting media and science. So what can I say, that NGO can be connection between science and media, because the subject climate change is not so popular. Some people, as Antoine said in previous panel, still doesn't believe that there are climate changes. So and sometimes scientists doesn't have the right words to explain the problems. So NGOs can be connection between science and media, between government and citizens, between experts and citizens. So the role of NGOs is very important. For me, the most interesting part, maybe it was these field trips, and also the role of NGOs in connecting with citizens who live in these areas, because in the areas where people live from mining, it's something like tradition, because they live from for a long period of time from mining, and then NGOs can work with a group of people to introduce them the problem of their decarbonization process, of halting, and also to help them to find some other possibilities for work. So.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, it definitely is true that first and foremost, when it comes to communication, this is something that is not problematic only here in the region of the Western Balkans. When it comes to media presence of topics that should be very important for every citizen, it is still sometimes seen as something put on us externally, as Rebecca mentioned. And not only in Serbia, we have, as citizens, as civil society organizations, problems actually addressing those issues that are not so easy to communicate. And of course, there's a very strong lobby on the other side of some of the sectors of energy, which, of course, in Czech Republic, for example, own quite a lot of media outlets. Alexander, you wanted to jump in on that?
Actually, lignite mining tradition in Serbia is quite small. We start mining in something like 1970s. Between 1972 and 1976.
In the V4, I think Milena was talking about the V4.
Yeah, but on the other side, mining tradition in Poland, in Czech Republic, in Slovakia is great. It goes 100 years back. So So the understanding of mining is different, resource is different, and when Poland, for example, says that they need to go into decarbonization, that means that they have to leave a relatively high quality resource, coal. When Serbia speaks about decarbonization, it means that they are going to leave the least efficient, the least productive resource it's available. The lignite in Serbia is 12 times less efficient than Central European average. 12 times, not 12%. So we are in completely different situation here. We are using more or less the same machinery as Central Europe. We are trying to use similar mining techniques, but the result is 12 times less productivity. Resource is weak, small, inadequate. You know, the planning of mining is nothing even close to the practice in Central Europe. So here decarbonization is a pathway toward huge improvement in productivity and efficiency of the industry. Of course, in Poland is different, in Czech Republic is different. I would like also to add combining intermittent renewable energy, solar, wind, heat pumps, air source heat pumps, with nuclear energy doesn't work. You have an example of German nuclear plant, Brockdorf. In 2017, they had corrosion of the core because they tried at that time to flex the power generation from that plant, and it didn't work. So this is very, very sensitive territory. Hydro resources from Serbia are essentially important for decarbonization of Central Europe. And let's not have any kind of doubt or any, we have to understand this on a political level.
Can I maybe just follow up on that and dig a bit deeper on the potential of renewables? Because we talked about the economics of the energy sector, and it's usually together with energy security the main topic and the discussion about why are we maybe not acting fast enough with coal phase out. You mentioned that basically the lignite produced in Serbia is not really efficient. It's also highly subsidized, tens of millions of euros going actually into the production companies just to make this possible and to actually maintain the labor in the mining sector. So Alexander, if I can ask you then, you mentioned that hydro plant energy is something that you see as the crucial aspect of maybe changing the energy mix in Serbia. So when it comes to wind, solar, you don't see a future for that in Serbia?
Well, this is totally the resources in Serbia and Central Europe are entirely different. So wind in Serbia is less productive than anywhere else in Central Europe. What is maximum wind in Serbia, maximum wind, is a kind of average in Poland or Romania or the Central European area. When it comes to, okay, solar is a matter of geography, so it could be somewhat better. But Serbia has a huge geothermal potential, which is not available in Central Europe. We have a political problem to access this geothermal potential. That's one aspect. Secondly, you mentioned subsidy. Subsidy from the government to power generation sector is minor here, if any. There is quite a contrary. Power generation sector is subsidizing government significantly, even beyond taxation, and power generation sector is providing a social safety net. on a social level. For energy poverty is maintained by low price of electricity, just to be clear. But there is another issue. We have internal cross-subsidy between hydropower and lignite industry, which actually creates a problem for the companies. So this internal cross-subsidy is the problem. But you will not find a nominal subsidy. When Energy Community Secretariat is talking about subsidies, they are only talking about nominal subsidies, and they are more or less marginal here in the region. The real subsidy is a permission to pollute and a cross subsidy with hydropower.
Thank you. When I was referencing the subsidies, I was referencing actually one of the articles about, and I'm not sure if I'll pronounce it well now, Resavica or Resavica mining plant. Resavica. That one got quite a lot of subsidies from the state.
But doesn't matter. Resavica is underground mine.
Yeah.
Wait a moment. But this underground mine is This underground mine is something like 200,000 tons a year. Mm-hmm. In the industry, which is 40 million tons. So it's a minor, small piece somewhere in the middle of the country, nothing to do with power generation industry in Serbia, etc., etc. To make things more interesting, these people may have jobs immediately today. This is political issue. This is not an industrial issue at all. So there is jobs waiting for them just across the road. So this is that's not really a subsidy. I mean, okay. It's so small that it doesn't really matter.
All right. Thank you for explaining, Rebecca. Maybe can I turn one more time to you when it comes to just transition? I mean, it all kind of revolves around today's discussion. You mentioned some of the aspects of the just transition, but how successful is Czech Republic so far in that matter? Because obviously there are some goals and plans and policies, but when it comes to maybe cross-European approach on that matter, do we already see some results, or will we see them only in 10, 15, 20 years' time? And over to you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think the Czech Republic is doing the most in the aspect of employment, as I've already mentioned. The Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs is campaigning quite intensely currently, and they have just introduced a digital platform for people that are currently out of their job and are seeking another. However, the issue in my eyes is that these newly created jobs and opportunities are mostly for people that, let's imagine someone is a secretary and would like to learn to work with Excel or with their computer. However, the biggest job loss potential is in the heavy industries of Czech Republic. It is in coal mining, it is also in the automotive sector, where the transition to electric mobility will cause a lot of job loss as well. And so I think whilst we are approaching, the Czech Republic is approaching it from the right angle, the execution is lacking. As I also mentioned, the entire process is not only about jobs, it is about empowering individuals, it's about strategic investments, and it's about trying to ensure that people of, let's say, my generation do not leave. And I think this is completely missed in Czech Republic. We can see that especially in the Karlovarský region, where there is still no university. To the best of my knowledge, there are also no plans for a university. So where are such people supposed to go if unqualified and middle to low qualified jobs are being phased out, and highly qualified jobs are impossible to get unless you move, which also requires some financing, for instance. Yeah, was there anything else to your question now that I'm
No. I think that is all. As we are slowly approaching the time limit of today's event, we have around 15 minutes. I would like to again open the floor to the remaining part of our participants. I already see one hand.
If you could introduce yourself.
This is Stanislaw Juski, Embassy of Poland. Ms. Milena, you told that you were on the field visits in 4 capitals of V4. What have you learned in Poland? Like you could benefit from, like some expert knowledge or anything like that you could apply into the transition in Serbia for the energy.
Thank you.
Or anyone else who has been to those.
Thank you. Maybe do we have another question? Maybe if I can use this opportunity.
Thank you so much for the question. I will pass the microphone immediately to Milena, but maybe we could also use the opportunity that we have so few other participants with us today. Damir, who was participating on the first panel, was also participating in those, and also Marina. So if you guys would like to say a few words about your experience afterwards, I think we would all appreciate that. But first, over to you, Milena.
Yeah, so that example about miners and NGOs was from Poland, in fact, from Konin. We had discussion with NGOs, and also it was very interesting because we went with them to the area which was a recultivated area, and you couldn't imagine that it was mined before in that area. So it was like some lake with birds and big shopping mall, but it was completely recultivated, and just you can't imagine how it was in previous years. Also in Ostrava, in Czech Republic, we didn't have, we weren't lucky with the weather, so we couldn't go to see the place, but they didn't recultivated all area, but also they built a shopping mall and other buildings, and people live there also. And in Konin, it is interesting that they have one big machine. They call it Dolores, and it's 42 years old, I think now, and it's kept as industrial heritage. So that's also interesting because like part of tradition, I think.
So recultivation of ex-mining fields or mining regions you see as a role model for this kind of places in Serbia, yes?
I don't know. Yes, and I was in fact in Lazarevac in a mining place, so I saw that the areas where they can't do more mining, they built like park with trees, and I think that's one of the possibilities.
So this is what you would like to do in Serbia, to recultivate old mines into places like this, yes? Like in Poland or Czech Republic?
No. The logic. This is not the only trip to Poland.
That's what I saw.
So we know Polish. Yeah, of course.
Yes.
But we know Polish energy sector for decades, And we've been looking very, very carefully. Poland for us is an enormously important model. For Konin, actually, she just mentioned, Konin became possible because there is a big biomass plant being built over there, which was a state-of-the-art technology at the time it was built. We are carefully looking to that plant. We are looking to Polaniec, we are looking to Turów, we are looking to Lagisza, we are looking to Włocławek, we are looking to power plants in Poland with you know, a lot of attention. We are looking to the Polish and Czech Republic industries in boilers, in all kind of aspects, turbines, etc. We've been looking extremely carefully what Poland have done with the reconstruction of LMZ type turbines, because our turbines are of that type, yeah, etc., etc. So there is a lot of work have been done, and a lot of work that needs to be done on actually applying Polish and Czech model to this country. It's extremely relevant, it's enormously important. We have been looking in not only in recultivation of land, we've been looking into massive reforestation which is happening in Poland. So we are looking also on logistics of that. So yes, there is, it's enormously relevant. Yesterday there was opening of our Energy Society conference annual in Zlatibor. I've been there. And the main sponsor of the conference is a big Polish company, big investor in the energy. But unfortunate occasion is this is the only big investor from Poland coming here. And last 20 years we actually failed to do much more. So there is a potential for far bigger cooperation, if that is your question.
May I add something? When Poland was the host of the Berlin process, the summit in Poznan, Poland organized before the summit in Rzeszów conference on for regional and local authorities and transition of coal regions. In fact, Poland offered its own expertise to the Western Balkans. Unfortunately, it didn't continue. It was an attempt, noble attempt of Poland, but obviously afterwards it went bilaterally. But it was a great idea and a great effort. From which country do you come?
I'm from the Polish embassy.
Ha! Thank you.
Thank you to everyone actually answering this question. And just to follow up on Jelitsa's comment, I believe the summit was in 2019, right? And then the COVID pandemic started. So maybe one of the reasons why this didn't really, kind of went in a flow in a direction we would want to was also somehow.
COVID ended.
Of course, COVID ended, but we are still here talking about coal phase out. Anyone in the back? Marina, Dame, do you want to add something when it comes to the experiences from Poland?
Thank you. Just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Marina Popovich from WWF Adria, and I was part of the study group to Poland and Czech Republic to understand better decarbonization measures and just transition process in these countries. And for me, the big impression actually, because I'm coming from WWF Adria, and we are strongly against EU taxonomy, new regulations towards nuclear energy. For me, the big impression is to understand how the nuclear energy in Poland is actually will fill the energy gap in a future period in a strategical way. And for me, the major question for the local NGOs and ministries and government representatives in Poland was what will they do with nuclear waste, and are they sure that it will not harm the environment, and how the process of storing that waste will be secured in the future. So because when I think of Serbia, I think that here we are very good in copy-pasting, how to say, European Union regulations, but we are very bad in implementation of such kind of regulations. On the other hand, I was very surprised, and I came back as very optimistic as I saw that just transition process really can happen, and that strong civil society can be and provide medium support for those people who will lose jobs or whatever. So I believe that strong civil society organizations are very important in that process, and for Serbia as well in future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, from my side, I would like to double down on the Citizens Assembly project. Just you can check it out at Shipyard Foundation 2022. And it signifies the importance of the multi-stakeholder dialogue and the society-wide dialogue in one society and in one country, and its importance for the development of the energy sector and the country itself. And I would also like to expand a little bit on the Marina's note on nuclear energy, because it was interesting to me to see that Poland not only plans, actually it was not a plan they were thinking about building like one, they are building one classic nuclear power plant, let's just say it like that, and they were thinking about building a lot of smaller ones with small nuclear reactors. And I was actually wondering if anybody has if you have additional information about it, maybe are they continuing with that plan, or what will they do about it? Because I'm really interested to see how those small nuclear reactors will help the energy supply of the state and the energy security, and how it will generally, let's say, solve the problems and help decarbonize the Polish energy sector. Those are my two main impressions.
Thank you, Alexander. Last words, and we have just 3 minutes left, so we'll close down in 3 minutes.
One more thing. We are looking to the example of energy companies in Poland and Czech Republic. They have independence from the government, they are traded on the financial markets, they have a corporate governance, etc., etc. All kind of aspects what Serbian electrical utility doesn't have. So there is also business model and this corporate discipline, which is also important here. So there is a lot to be learned. So that's
Thank you. Yes, Jelica, do you want to close it?
No, I
No? Okay. One comment.
A sentence.
All right.
I asked Alexander, but he forgot to inform you that we are taking part in a project of a consortium of civil society organizations from the Western Balkans. Connected We Can, strengthening Western Balkan 6 civil society organizations agency in economic and investment plan. It's research trying to get proper knowledge about capacities of civil society organizations to monitor big infrastructure projects performed in our region. And we also analyzed some specific projects in order to discover what was the agency of the civil society. It's very important, and it was mentioned also by Dragana, that monitoring role of civil society is very important. I think it will be also one of the conclusions of this project. Thank you.
And with this, I think our time has come to wrap up today's event. I would like to thank again Milena, Alexander, Rebecca online, and also the speakers on the first panel, the Czech Embassy to actually joining the forces with us, with the presence of Mr. Ambassador. And we do believe that this is not the end, although this is the end of our project. I do believe we will try to further strengthen this cross-regional cooperation, sharing the experience between the V4 countries, the Western Balkan 6, and that maybe in 10, 15 years' times we will sit here and talk about the positive aspects of what this cooperation managed to achieve. So with this, thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon and enjoy the rest of the day.